The night I turned 25, my parents stood in front of everyone I loved, told me I was no longer their daughter, and 3 tables away, the family I'd spent my entire life searching for had no idea I existed. My name is Emma Carter, and until that night, I believed the hardest thing I would ever have to survive was growing up in a house where love always came with conditions. I was wrong. The hardest part wasn't being disowned. It was realizing my entire life had been built around a lie so carefully protected that even the people living it seemed to believe it. Looking back now, every strange memory, every awkward silence, every unanswered question suddenly fits together like pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered across 25 years. But on my birthday, I knew none of that. I only knew I was wearing a blue dress my grandmother had sewn before she passed away, carrying a chocolate cake from my favorite bakery, and hoping, against every lesson my parents had ever taught me, that maybe this year would finally be different. Hope has a strange way of surviving long after it should. My parents never celebrated birthdays because they wanted to. They celebrated them because appearances mattered. My father, Richard Carter, owned a respected accounting firm in our small Ohio town. Everyone knew him as the dependable man who never missed church, donated to local charities, and remembered everyone's name. At home, he remembered different things. He remembered every mistake. Every imperfect grade. Every dollar he spent on me. Every disagreement I'd ever dared to have. My mother, Susan, wasn't cruel in obvious ways. She simply mastered disappointment. A sigh. A look. A quiet sentence that could make you question your worth for weeks. You're capable of so much more. I expected better. You've embarrassed us. By the time I finished college, I had become an expert at apologizing for things that weren't my fault. Even when I moved into my own apartment, those habits followed me. Whenever my phone rang and I saw Mom on the screen, my shoulders automatically tensed. Therapists call it conditioning. I used to call it family. The birthday dinner was my mother's idea. A proper celebration, she'd said over the phone. 25 is important. Those words alone surprised me. My parents had forgotten my 23rd birthday entirely. The year before, they'd mailed a card with no message inside. Just their signatures. So when Mom reserved the private room at Ashton House Restaurant, I convinced myself it meant something. Maybe people changed. Maybe time softened old wounds. Maybe all those late-night conversations with my best friend Lily had finally convinced me to stop expecting the worst. Lily wasn't so optimistic. She stirred her coffee that morning and studied me over the rim of her mug. You trust them? I want to. That's not what I asked. I smiled without answering. Because she already knew the truth. No. I didn't trust them. I simply missed the idea of having parents who loved me without keeping score. There's a difference. The restaurant sat on a hill overlooking the river. White brick. Tall windows. Soft piano music floating through the entrance. It was elegant without trying too hard. Exactly the kind of place my parents loved because everyone could see they could afford it. The hostess smiled warmly. Happy birthday, Miss Carter. I thanked her. My parents are already here? She checked the reservation. They arrived about 40 minutes ago. 40 minutes. That was unusual. My father hated waiting. As I followed her through the dining room, I noticed something else. Nearly every table seemed occupied by families celebrating something. Anniversaries. Graduations. Birthdays. Children laughing. Grandparents taking pictures. For reasons I couldn't explain, that simple happiness made me unexpectedly emotional. I wondered what it felt like to belong somewhere without earning your place every single day. The private room sat toward the back. When I walked inside, everyone clapped. My parents. My Aunt Carol. Uncle Mike. 2 cousins. Family friends I'd known since childhood. About 15 people altogether. More than I'd expected. Still manageable. My mother hugged me tightly enough for everyone to notice. There she is. My father raised his wine glass. Our birthday girl. For a moment. Just a moment. It almost felt real. Dinner started pleasantly. People asked about work. I had recently accepted a promotion to project manager at an architecture firm. The promotion meant longer hours but also enough money to finally think about buying a home. Everyone congratulated me. Even Dad smiled. That's my girl. The words landed strangely. He hadn't called me that in years. Servers brought appetizers. Fresh bread. Roasted vegetables. Seafood. Expensive wine. Conversation drifted from sports to politics to family vacations. I relaxed. Not completely. But enough to laugh once or twice. Enough to believe Lily might have been wrong. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. On the way back, I passed through the main dining room. That's when I noticed them. A family of 8 seated 3 tables away. Nothing unusual about that. Except. The older woman looked exactly like me. Not similar. Not vaguely familiar. Exactly. The same gray-blue eyes. The same slightly crooked smile. The same tiny dimple on the left cheek. She laughed at something a teenage boy said, and my heart stopped. Because when she tilted her head, I saw my own face 25 years older. I stood frozen. One of the waiters almost bumped into me carrying dessert plates. Ma'am? I stepped aside without taking my eyes off that table. The woman reached across and squeezed the hand of a young girl beside her. A man sitting next to her smiled with unmistakable affection. The entire family looked comfortable. Connected. Like people who had spent years loving one another. I couldn't explain why I couldn't stop staring. Then the woman looked up. For one impossible second. Our eyes met. Confusion flickered across her face. She whispered something to the man beside her. He turned toward me. His expression changed instantly. Not recognition. Shock. The kind of shock people have when they're looking at something they never expected to see. I looked away first. My pulse thundered in my ears. Why did they look at me like that? And why did I suddenly feel as if I'd just walked into someone else's memory? Chapter 1, Part 2. I stood there longer than I should have. The waiter carrying a tray of desserts gave me a polite smile before weaving past me, but I barely noticed. My eyes stayed fixed on the family 3 tables away. The older woman's smile had faded. She wasn't staring anymore, but she wasn't looking away either. It was as if she were trying to remember where she'd seen me before. The man beside her leaned closer and quietly said something. She nodded without taking her eyes off me. A strange chill crawled up my arms. I had never seen either of them in my life. At least, I didn't think I had. Emma? I jumped. It was my cousin Rachel standing a few feet away, balancing 2 glasses of sparkling water. There you are, she laughed. Your mom thought you escaped. I glanced back toward the other table. They had returned to their conversation. Looking at the view. Rachel smiled. Come on. They're about to bring your cake. I forced myself to follow her. But something inside me stayed behind with that family. The room felt different when I sat back down. Nothing had changed. The same laughter. The same expensive wine. The same polished silverware catching the warm light. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had quietly opened a door I hadn't noticed before. My father poured himself another glass. You disappear every birthday, he joked. A girl has to keep a little mystery. Everyone laughed. Even me. But it sounded hollow. I found myself glancing toward the entrance every few seconds, wondering if the family in the dining room was leaving. Why did I care? I didn't know. Maybe because I'd never seen someone who looked so much like me. Growing up, people always told me I had my father's eyes. My mother's smile. Neither had ever seemed true. I had dark brown hair. They were both blonde as children. I was left-handed. Everyone else in my family was right-handed. Even little things, my allergies, my love of sketching buildings, my unusually deep voice for a woman, always felt slightly out of place. Whenever I asked questions as a child, my mother brushed them away. Families aren't photocopies. Maybe she was right. But tonight, for the first time, I wasn't sure. Dessert arrived. A beautiful chocolate cake covered with fresh strawberries. 25 candles glowed softly across the top. The room dimmed. Everyone began singing. Happy birthday. I smiled for the photographs. I thanked everyone. I made a wish I couldn't even remember 5 seconds later. As I leaned forward to blow out the candles, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I ignored it. A second later. It buzzed again. Then again. 3 calls. Back to back. I frowned. Everything okay? Aunt Carol asked. Probably spam. I silenced the phone and slipped it into my purse. But something told me it wasn't spam. After dessert, people drifted into smaller conversations. My father stood near the bar with Uncle Mike discussing golf. My mother showed vacation photos to Aunt Carol. I stepped outside onto the restaurant's balcony for fresh air. The river reflected the orange glow of the sunset. Boats drifted lazily downstream. Normally, I loved quiet moments like this. Tonight my thoughts refused to settle. I pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls. Same number. Then, a voicemail. No name. No contact. Just a local area code. I pressed play. Static. Heavy breathing. Then a woman's voice. Soft. Older. Shaking. Please, if this is Emma, don't leave before I speak to you. The recording ended. I stared at the screen. 31 seconds. That was all. No explanation. No name. Nothing. My heartbeat quickened. How did she know where I was? The balcony door opened behind me. I quickly locked my phone. My mother stepped outside. There you are. She smiled, though something about it felt forced. You've been disappearing a lot tonight. Just needed some air. She looked toward the river. It's beautiful. It is. Silence settled between us. An uncomfortable silence. Finally she spoke. Emma. Her voice softened. We've made mistakes. I looked at her. I know. But we've always done what we believed was best. That sentence lingered in the air. Not an apology. Not really. More like a justification. Before I could answer, someone inside called her name. She squeezed my arm. We'll talk later. Then she disappeared back inside. I watched the door close. For some reason, her words unsettled me even more than the voicemail. Curiosity finally won. I dialed the unknown number. 1 ring. 2. 3. Someone answered. Neither of us spoke. Then the same trembling voice whispered. Emma? Yes. A long pause. I've waited 25 years to hear your voice. Every muscle in my body tightened. I'm sorry, I said carefully. Who is this? The woman didn't answer. Instead she asked. Are your parents with you? The question caught me off guard. Yes. Another silence. Then I heard someone in the background urgently saying. Margaret, don't. The woman ignored them. I don't have much time. What are you talking about? I need you to know. Her breathing became uneven. None of this was your fault. What wasn't? Please don't let them send you away before you hear the truth. Click. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. My reflection in the black screen looked almost unfamiliar. Who was Margaret? What truth? And how did she know what my parents were about to do, before I did? I took one slow breath, turned toward the restaurant window. And froze. Inside, through the glass, I saw my father standing beside the family from 3 tables away. He wasn't introducing himself. He wasn't greeting strangers. He was arguing with them. And the woman who had called me was crying. My first instinct was that I had misunderstood what I was seeing. The glass reflected the lights from the patio, and people moved in every direction inside the restaurant. Maybe my father wasn't speaking to that family. Maybe he had simply stopped beside their table. Then he pointed. Not at the table. At me. Every conversation at that table stopped. The older woman, Margaret, if the voice on the phone belonged to her, slowly turned toward the window. Her eyes found mine again, and whatever color remained in her face disappeared. The man beside her stood so quickly his chair scraped across the hardwood floor. My father's jaw tightened. He said something I couldn't hear. The man answered. Neither of them raised their voice, but their expressions carried years of history. History that clearly didn't include me. Or maybe. History that included me more than anyone had ever admitted. I hurried back inside before I could think myself out of it. The dining room suddenly felt too warm. Every sound seemed louder, the clink of silverware, the low hum of conversations, the piano in the corner. I walked toward their table. Halfway there, my father saw me. His expression changed instantly. Not surprise. Panic. It lasted less than a second before the familiar smile returned. Emma, he said, stepping directly into my path. Where have you been? Everyone's waiting. I looked past him. The family had gone silent. Margaret clutched a folded white envelope so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. The teenage boy stared openly at me. A young woman about my age looked back and forth between me and Margaret as though trying to solve a puzzle. Who are they? I asked quietly. Dad didn't even glance behind him. Nobody you know. They seemed upset. They're leaving. His answer came too fast. Too clean. The kind of answer meant to end a conversation before it started. I didn't move. Neither did he. For a brief moment, we stood there like strangers blocking each other's way. Then the restaurant manager approached with an apologetic smile. Is everything all right here? Dad answered before I could speak. Everything's fine. The manager looked at me. I forced a smile. Yes, everything's fine. It was the biggest lie I'd told all year. Back in the private room, everyone acted as though nothing had happened. Coffee appeared. Gift bags were passed around. Someone suggested another group photo. I barely heard any of it. My mind kept replaying the voicemail. I've waited 25 years to hear your voice. 25 years. Exactly my age. That couldn't be a coincidence. Could it? I reached for my purse and quietly opened it beneath the table. The envelope from the bakery sat beside my phone. Under it was a small wrapped box from my parents. Simple white paper. Silver ribbon. No birthday card. Just my name written in my mother's neat handwriting. Open ours first, she said with an unusually bright smile. Every eye turned toward me. I untied the ribbon. Inside was a velvet jewelry box. For one hopeful second, I thought perhaps tonight really was about reconciliation. I lifted the lid. A key. Nothing else. Just a small brass key attached to a faded leather tag. Stamped into the leather were 4 numbers. 2187. The room remained silent. "What does it open?" I asked. Dad leaned back in his chair. "You'll find out." "When?" "When the time is right." His answer irritated me more than I expected. Since when did birthdays come with riddles? Conversation slowly resumed, but I couldn't stop turning the key over in my hand. It wasn't new. The brass had darkened with age. Tiny scratches covered one side. Someone had carried it for years. Maybe decades. I slipped it into my purse beside my phone. Almost immediately, another vibration. This time it wasn't a call. It was a text. Unknown number. Only 6 words. "Don't let them keep the key." I stared at the message. A second text arrived. "It belongs to your mother. Not Susan. Not your parents. Just your mother." A cold wave rolled through my chest. Wasn't Susan my mother? Who else could they possibly mean? Before I could reply, the messages disappeared. Not deleted from my phone. The sender had switched the conversation to an unavailable number. When I tried calling back, I heard only an automated recording. "This number is no longer in service." I looked around the table. No one seemed to notice my hands shaking. An hour later, guests began saying their goodbyes. Hugs. Pictures. Promises to meet again soon. The evening appeared perfectly normal. Almost scripted. As Aunt Carol hugged me, she whispered something so quietly I barely caught it. "You look just like her." I pulled back. "What?" Her eyes widened. Nothing. "You said I look like someone." She glanced toward my parents. Then lowered her voice even further. "Forget I said anything." Before I could ask another question, she walked away. She didn't even look back. The restaurant slowly emptied. The mysterious family was gone. Their table had already been cleared. Only a forgotten napkin remained where Margaret had been sitting. I stood there for a long moment. Disappointed. Relieved. Confused. I wasn't even sure anymore. The hostess approached carrying a small envelope. "Miss Carter?" "Yes?" "A woman asked me to give you this after she left." My pulse jumped. "Did she leave a name?" The hostess shook her head. "She only said you'd understand." I almost laughed. I understood nothing. The envelope was old. Cream-colored. My name was written across the front in elegant handwriting. Not my mother's. Inside was a single photograph. It showed a hospital room. A woman exhausted from childbirth lay in bed, smiling through tears. Beside her stood the same man I'd seen tonight arguing with my father. Between them, wrapped in a pink blanket, was a newborn baby. Written carefully on the back in blue ink were 8 words that stole the air from my lungs. Emma Grace, April 14, 2001. Welcome home, sweetheart. April 14. My birthday. My knees nearly gave out. Because according to every story I'd ever been told, my mother had given birth to me in a different hospital. In a different city. On a different day. And as I turned the photograph over one more time, something slipped from inside the envelope and landed silently at my feet. It was a birth certificate. The mother's name wasn't Susan Carter. And the father's name wasn't Richard Carter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure whose daughter I had been celebrating becoming. Chapter 1, Part 4. For a few seconds, I forgot how to breathe. The birth certificate trembled in my hands as the sounds of the restaurant faded into the background. Plates clinked somewhere behind me. A server laughed with a coworker near the kitchen. The piano continued playing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But my world had tilted. The document looked old, its edges softened by time. It wasn't a photocopy. It wasn't something printed from the internet. It was an original. Across the top, in faded black letters, were the words Certificate of Live Birth. My eyes moved straight to the names. Mother, Margaret Collins. Father, Daniel Collins. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. There, in the center of the page, was my name. Emma Grace Collins. Not Emma Grace Carter. Collins. The last name belonged to the family sitting 3 tables away. The same family my father had argued with only minutes earlier. The same woman who had called me. The same woman whose face looked so much like mine that it had stopped me in my tracks. I swallowed hard. This can't be real. My voice barely rose above a whisper. Someone had to be playing a cruel joke. There had to be another explanation. There always was. Miss Carter? The hostess's gentle voice pulled me back. Are you all right? I quickly folded the certificate and slipped it back into the envelope. Yes. The word came automatically. The same automatic answer I'd given my entire life. No matter how bad things became. I always said I was fine. The hostess didn't look convinced. If you need a moment, you're welcome to sit. I'll be okay. She hesitated before nodding. As she walked away, I realized my legs were shaking badly enough that I actually needed the chair she had offered. Instead, I leaned against the wall until the room stopped spinning. One question repeated itself over and over. If Margaret Collins was my mother, who had Susan Carter been raising for 25 years? Outside, the evening air felt colder than before. The parking lot had nearly emptied. Only a handful of cars remained beneath the yellow lights. My parents stood beside my father's black SUV, saying goodbye to Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike. I stayed hidden near the restaurant entrance. For the first time in my life, I didn't want them to see me. I wanted to see them. Without them knowing. As Aunt Carol hugged my mother, she whispered something. I couldn't hear every word. Only the last sentence. She deserves to know. My mother's shoulders stiffened. No. One word. Sharp. Final. Dad noticed the exchange immediately. He stepped closer. Enough. Aunt Carol looked away. She climbed into Uncle Mike's truck without another word. Dad watched them leave before turning toward Mom. Even from 30 feet away, I could see the strain on both of their faces. They weren't relieved the evening was over. They looked frightened. I waited until they drove away. Only then did I walk to my own car. I locked the doors the second I got inside. The envelope rested on the passenger seat. The brass key sat beside it. 2 objects. Both delivered tonight. Both connected somehow. Neither made sense. I opened the envelope again. Behind the birth certificate was another folded piece of paper. I hadn't noticed it before. It was a letter. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting matched the name on the envelope. Margaret's. I unfolded it carefully. Only the first few lines had been written. Emma, if you're reading this, then something has finally gone wrong. I never wanted you to learn the truth this way. The letter ended there. The bottom half had been torn away. Not folded. Not damaged. Torn. Someone had deliberately removed the rest. I searched the envelope again. Nothing. Just the missing half. Someone had wanted me to read enough to ask questions. But not enough to get answers. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. Birthday survivor, she asked the moment I answered. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. Emma? My voice cracked. I think my parents lied to me. Silence. Then Lily asked the question only a best friend knows to ask. How big? I looked at the birth certificate. Everything. She didn't laugh. didn't interrupt. Where are you? In the restaurant parking lot. I'm coming. Lily, it's almost 10. I don't care. It's 40 minutes away. I know. I don't even know what to tell you. You don't have to. Her voice softened. Just don't go home alone. For the first time that night, I felt something close to relief. I remained in the parking lot while I waited. The river reflected the city lights. Cars passed on the highway in the distance. Every few minutes I reread the birth certificate. Every time I hoped the names would somehow change. They never did. About 30 minutes later, headlights pulled into the nearly empty lot. Lily climbed out before the engine even stopped. She took one look at my face. What happened? Instead of answering, I handed her the envelope. She read everything in silence. The photograph. The certificate. The unfinished letter. When she looked up again, her eyes were wide. This isn't fake. I know. You've never mentioned anyone named Margaret. I've never heard the name before tonight. Lily leaned against my car and looked back toward the restaurant. So. She spoke slowly. The family sitting 3 tables away. I think. I couldn't finish the sentence. She finished it for me. Might actually be your family. The words hung in the cold night air. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally Lily asked. What are you going to do? I looked at the brass key still resting in my palm. I think this key is the only thing my parents didn't expect me to have. And if that's true? I met her eyes. Then whatever it opens. I was never supposed to see. Before either of us could say another word, headlights swept across the parking lot. A dark sedan pulled in slowly. It stopped 3 spaces away. The driver's door opened. Margaret stepped out alone. She looked exhausted, as though she had aged years in a single evening. She didn't come any closer. She simply raised one trembling hand and said the words that would change the direction of my life forever. Emma. Tears filled her eyes. Before you decide who your parents are, you deserve to know why I spent 25 years believing you were dead.